This weather looks to make a sharp turn as we head into next week. We're going to break down the details for you in this update. Take a look at the big picture on the satellite view. We have that area instability that draped across the south. There's a dry slot that's finally moving in, but that's left behind that mesoscale convective system that went through areas of Louisiana yesterday with some 90-mile-per-hour wind gusts in its wake. And unfortunately, looked like a tornado did in fact touch down into Sulphur, Louisiana. Now that convective complex is highlighted over across Florida into the southeast this morning. We also have additional showers and thunderstorms that's draped across portions of Illinois and back through Kentucky. And then, yes, we have another piece of energy that will be trailing behind this one, setting the stage for more severe storms as we head into Wednesday and Thursday. So it's been an incredibly active April and May so far, and the culprit is the temperatures, right? I mean, we've had these troughs that just inundating the West Coast. You can see the below average temperatures that's really been highlighted for the last 2 weeks in the month of May across a good part of the West. We have these troughs that come down and tap into these well above average temperature anomalies across the central and eastern 2/3 of the US, with an abundance amount of moisture coming in off the Gulf of Mexico. And that is fuel to the fire that adds instability to the atmosphere and unfortunately an elevated severe threat. And we've seen a lot of tornadic spin up tornadoes as well. In fact, look at the massive jump just in the last 6 weeks, guys. So at most all of this is really started about middle of March. That's typically when severe weather season, at least the bulk of it, really starts to ramp up. So it's been incredibly active over the last 2 months. And the black line, that is where you typically are this time of year. But you can see the noticeably jump up as we entered April, and we've been very active for the last 6 weeks, almost approaching 800 tornadoes so far this year. There's only been one other year that's been more active than this far, this early on, just in the last 15 years. So it's been an incredibly active last 6 weeks, and it looks to continue to remain active for the rest of the week as well. We have more storms that's going to be draped across areas of Florida today. Not as intense as it was yesterday, but nonetheless, if you're going to be seeing a tornado or two today, it's likely going to be in central Florida into the Jacksonville region, back in through Orlando possibly, as this area will be rotating. They do have a 5% probability of seeing an isolated spin up tornado later on this afternoon. You also have that area of instability that's all across the southeast, and those could be a little bit stronger as you swing further north into Tennessee as well as in Kentucky. Back further west, we do have the active dry line likely going to get active. This is more of an isolated threat, not terribly too concerned about this particular threat, but nonetheless, you can't roll out some strong to elevated severe storms in the heat of the afternoon as we get deeper into the day. But going into tomorrow, as well into Wednesday, I think that's when things likely start to ramp up again. We're starting to look at this more significant trough that will be diving in. Look how far south it is, folks. It's pretty far south. And the further south it's able to dig, the more energy and the more moisture it's going to be able to tap into. And it's all the way down in the Baja of California. And we know we have just ripe conditions that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to provide the lift mechanisms that's necessary to re-aggravate the severe threat as we head into Wednesday, but especially as we head into Thursday. So more like Wednesday is kind of an isolated threat to scattered threat, not terribly too concerned. We have that first system that will be still draped across areas of Florida and back through the Carolinas. This is just kind of a marginal risk. They're not terribly too concerned about this particular activity during the day on your Wednesday time frame, but nonetheless, be on the lookout because this season has definitely had a lot of surprises with it as well. And then there's the dry line setup, that the initial stage of that upper level low that will be highlighted across Baja of California. That's going to be close enough to provide the lift mechanism across the panhandle of Texas, back through western Oklahoma into Kansas, as well as getting into portions of Iowa during the day on Wednesday. But as we head into Thursday, I think that's when one of the more intense days will likely come to fruition, because as that system gets a little bit closer to Texas, man, it's going to really pull in these water content values. And whenever you see these values approaching over 2 inches per hour, this area has just been inundated with a lot of flooding as of late across Louisiana and much of the southeast Texas. And this is the last thing you need, is showing, water content values upwards almost 2 inches per hour, is again having renewed flood threats across that region, but also has a lot more instability to tap into it as well. We actually saw this last Thursday down here. Some of these extreme instability values, these CAPE values, this convective available potential energy, as that system be tapping into this air mass, yes, it's got a lot of intense instability. That just adds fuel to the fire in the heat of the day. And you got CAPE values approaching the 4 to 5,000 range, folks. That is a lot of instability. In fact, it was last Thursday that down there into the hill country, Johnson City, Texas, picked up a 6.2-inch hailstone. It was the second largest in Texas history, folks, and it had similar instability to work with. So getting very concerned about another setup that could likely unfold. And right now, the Storm Prediction Center does in fact have that hatched risk for those areas across West Texas into the hill country. It is a slight risk right now, but I do feel that's going to be elevated and upgraded to at least enhanced risk as we get closer to Thursday, as things look to really get activated again into the heat of the afternoon there in West Texas, even further south into the hill country, likely, moderating or shifting as it shifts further east, decreasing the severe weather threat, but upping the intensity on the rainfall aspect, especially as you get south of I-20. And that's exactly what the Weather Prediction Center kind of has. I mean, for areas into Thursday, they do have those areas that's highlighted in green. You're likely going to see at least about an inch of rain that's going to be draped across West Texas and much of Oklahoma and Missouri back into Arkansas. But once you get further off to the east, it includes the Dallas-Fort Worth area, much of the hill country, and especially those highlighted areas in yellow would likely see an additional possibly 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. But once you get to that, that red shaded area where I showed you the water content values are in that 2-inch per hour range, you could easily see another 3 to 5 inches of heavy rainfall into southeast Texas and much of Louisiana. So that is the last thing this area needs, because man, they has just been crazy wet across this region, and it looks to continue to remain active at least for this week. So if you take a look at the precipitation over those 24 hours, literally from Thursday morning to Friday morning, you can see the placement, right? So where that low pressure center kind of misses out, it's further south. It doesn't even hit the US, it's into Mexico. So that provides next to nothing for those areas in the West Coast and much of the Southwest. But it's really not until they're able to tap into that energy from the Gulf of Mexico that's really highlighted across West Texas. And this will swing across, turn it into a heavy rainmaker for a good part of North and Central and East Texas, as well as into Louisiana. Then lighter amounts as you swing further north into New Mexico, into the Panhandle, as well as into portions of Missouri and back into Illinois, as those areas across the Southeast will be drying out, waiting for this other system that will be approaching your area by the time we head into Friday. So as we go into Friday, kind of a similar setup. This main system will be draped across the I-10, I-20, I-30 corridor. So for those areas into Louisiana, going to have to be on the lookout again for additional severe storms highlighted across that region, as we'll have yet another mesoscale convective system that will be draped across those areas of the deep south. So you have to be on the lookout for increased wind gust, definitely some isolated tornadoes, and that larger hail aspect as these continue to tap into that instability and that very high water content values further south you live. So for those areas back into Louisiana, into Mississippi, into Alabama, getting into Georgia again, as we highlight into Friday, look for definitely some rougher times ahead during the day on Friday. Then those will swing across into Saturday. So as we get into Saturday, kind of the similar setup where we see today, you're going to go through the same aspects as we head into coming up on Saturday, about 5 days from now. Those areas across the Florida Panhandle, back through southern areas of Alabama, through Georgia, into the Carolinas. Definitely have to be on the lookout for more severe storms, as they will be racing across. But going into Sunday, I do feel things change. So if you break it down for the next 5 days, here's where the convective complexes will likely unfold. Much of the West continues to remain on that dry slot. I don't really see anything coming into your neck of the woods. Everything is highlighted east of the Continental Divide. You still have some cooler temperatures coming into Colorado. In fact, they actually saw some snow just west of Colorado Springs on Mother's Day. Some areas got like 10 inches of snow. So not that unheard of, but it tells you there's that colder air that's been mainly confined out west. But out east, it's been mainly combined with the well above average temperature anomalies and the very conducive atmosphere and the troughs that will be coming in. And that provides everything, all the ingredients necessary to produce that heavier rainfall, especially along this corridor into southeast Texas, into Louisiana, and back into Mississippi again, as well as into Alabama, into Georgia, and getting back into Florida as well. Little lighter amounts as you swing further north through the Carolinas, as well as through Kentucky, into Illinois, and then even lighter amounts as you swing even further north as we head into Iowa, Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin. But going into next week, I do feel things are going to change a little bit. So what we're going to be seeing is this ridge of high pressure that's been building down there in Mexico will finally be on the move, and that's going to be surging north. And that's going to create more ridging for those areas in the south, and that ridging will start to shut off the taps, at least for a little bit, for those areas across the south, as the placement of the cooler anomalies will shift a little bit further north as well. So now those areas across the Pacific Northwest, I think eventually these will swing eastbound and get these areas under the gun. So what we're going to be seeing is a noticeable change in the overall setups of these troughs as they come in, and as the ridge will continue to build all week long for those areas across the south. They'll have some cooler anomalies that are going to be forced to go up and over that ridge. So that would put the storm track a little bit different. So as we head into next week, you can see where the storm track is. Now it shifts further south into Southern California and back through the deserts. That's a noticeable difference, because that's going to be feeling the effects of this ridging that's going to be building up and over the top. And those low pressure centers have to go up and over the top of that ridge placement. So we're likely going to be seeing areas of low pressure that's highlighted across the New Mexico and the Rockies continue to shift northeast and leave a lot of areas further south and the southeast on the warmer but overall drier side, as that ridge of high pressure will be building further south. And that's exactly what I think is going to take place as we head into Tuesday of next week. So you got the ridge is going to be starting to build across the south. Look at the dry slot, what a much needed dry slot for those areas. But that also that helps put the storm track further north. So now we have areas of low pressure center that will be draped across areas of the into Colorado, and then really getting its act together as we move through Kansas. And that puts the rain probabilities and increased severe storm probabilities further north, now back into Nebraska. And I think this will eventually swing into Iowa, as well as into Minnesota, even Wisconsin, as we head into Wednesday of next week. So that's going to be a noticeable change. We could be looking at some pretty significant areas of low pressure. And with that storm track further north, that puts all the activity further north as well, as you see much of the south and southeast will be under that ridge of high pressure and experiencing a lot of that sinking air versus all the upward rising motion air you've seen as of late. And yes, the culprit will be this ridge of high pressure that's just been building down there in Mexico, that's finally going to be on the move as we head towards meteorology summer, which actually starts on June 1st. It's not that far away, first. All this will be counted towards summer as that ridge of high pressure starts to build further north. And that storm track will also build further north. And eventually, those rain probabilities will be shifting further north as well. So, after this week, as we head into next week, starting on Monday, really on Sunday, going into those areas of across next week, we see much of the South starting to see below average temperatures and precipitate, but below average precipitation. But also for areas further north, we start to see the placement changes and puts the storm track further north. So for those areas across Nebraska and much of Iowa and through areas of northern the Midwest, you're going to be tapping into that instability and with the increased elevated showers and storm threat as we head into next week. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.